Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Back in the Late 1900s with Rich and Jay. I am Rich. Find me on all the socials at rich.piva, doing reviews, Musicpedia Metal, the Doom Charts contributor, as a sponsor for Tampa Doom and Gloom Fest in November. We'll talk more about that at a later date, but super excited to have that show with some of my favorite bands like Florist, Broad Slab, and New Dawn Fades. And I'm here with my buddy Jay. Jay, what's up?
How's it going?
Excellent. So, a little behind the scenes of how this show works. Jay sends me a message and says, I'm going to get this guy on the show. Send an invite. And then he asks me three times to send the invite. But I never asked Jay why or who or what, because I trust Jay because Jay's got amazing taste. And we have a very similar brain when it comes to music. And so Jay says they wants this person on the show. It's going to happen.
I
So
have
very
not let you
excited.
down yet.
No, you have yet to, and I doubt you ever will. So tell us a little bit about our guest today, if you don't mind, Jay.
Yeah, so our guest today is Tracy Thornton. Tracy is a pan drum player, but we originally met when I was in a band called Misplaced Aggression in the early 1990s here in Greensboro, selling out clubs crazy. And Tracy was in a band called Toxic Popsicle, which also had in that band Robert Sledge, who played bass for Ben Folds 5 eventually.
Good old days.
A lot of degrees
Yeah,
of separation there and been various bands.
yeah,
And I think one of the things you sold me on was that Tracy was a huge music nerd too, which I got very
yeah.
excited about. So
So my favorite story is the time that I went to Best Buy at 10 o'clock in the morning when they opened to come get the new Slayer album. And who did I run into? That guy.
1000%. That's a while back, dude.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, so Tracy, the Pan Rock stuff, super fabulous. It goes back to even further than the Pan Rocks LA and the Pan Rocks Rush stuff. I remember the Pan for Punks Ramones tribute you did, like 10 years before the LA stuff came out. Tell me how all this stuff came to be. I mean, you've been playing with some heavyweights.
Yeah, I've gotten really lucky. Um, but yeah, it started with the Ramones thing because, I was, in Toxic, and before that was a metal drummer, and I remember you coming into town. I think we actually met at the Music Barn before we met in the
Yeah,
clubs
I think you're right.
when you first came in town. But yeah, dude, to make a long story short, the very first CD I did for steel drums when I got into steel drums was a Christmas CD called Tracy Thornton Stealing Christmas, and that used to pay my way to Trinidad every year to play Panorama. But to get sounds for that record, my buddy Rick Earl and I, we set up studio in my mom and dad's house. We turned their whole house into the studio. We had snakes rolling. Different rooms were for drums and pans and percussion. And to get our sounds, this was back in '94. We used Blitzkrieg Bop, and just as a giggle. And it turned out so good. I'm like, man, one day I'm going to make a whole Ramones CD on steel pan. And fast forward about 11 years later, just for a giggle for Jerry Crew and my buddy Jeff Baker, I had a couple of months off. I did a whole record just so we could have a giggle with it. And the next thing I knew, their tour manager, Monty Melnick, got a hold of it and gave it to their publicist. And I was in Spin Magazine getting it reviewed. And then their publicist worked for me for a while because I didn't have a band. So she got me a lot of press. So I was just like, well, maybe there's something to this. So that was like maybe this Pan Rocks thing I had in my head would work. And then forward to I think 2013 was my first big show in Ohio, and I've been on that path ever since.
Awesome. So once some time passed, you did the Pan Rocks LA stuff. I'm not going to spoil who's on the record. I'm going to let you tell everybody. Um, but holy shit. Like the songs on there that you guys did and the talent that you had with you. Ridiculous.
Yeah, that came out really organically. We did a project that people don't know called Project LA back in 2017. And I'd met Matt Starr, who was playing drums at the time with Ace Frehley, who was friends with Mark Schumann, who at the time was playing drums. He was transitioning from playing with Cher in Vegas, get ready to go out on the road with Pink. And I'd met um, Schumann at a PASIC event that I had an 80-piece steel drum band at PASIC in San Antonio, and he saw that. And he was like, dude, that's very cool. when you come through LA, we should chat. Long story short, I met Matt Starr through him, and then Matt wanted to know if I could put together a little band out in Hollywood while I was out there to play at the Whiskey. I think he just wanted to see it in person if people would like it. So we played one of those Tuesday night ultimate jams, and we had Perkins came out to play with us. First time you saw me play with Perkins was here at GTCC. We can talk about that. So this was the next time I gave him a call. I was like, hey, Perk, we're going to put together a little band. Will you play with us at the Whiskey? And he was like, sure, which was super cool of him. And we had, I think Billy Idol's guitar player at the time, his name was Jimmy something. I can't remember the bass player. But anyway, we did a couple of tunes that night, and the crowd loved it, which was awesome because you never know, it was a new thing. And then I got an email from Matt, who knew my goal and my vision for Pan Rocks. And he gave me this email. He was like, well, I think this is the first thing we should do, and we should go into a studio. And these are the players that I can get. And on the list was Billy Sheehan. I'm like, I want that guy. And the guitar player we had up until a week before was Phil X. He was on, and then he ended up having to fly to, I think, New York City to do something with Bon Jovi for like a promo thing. And then luckily we got Tracy Guns to come in to fill in for him, which was awesome. So that was a cool thing. Bruce Kulick played on Detroit Rock City with Matt's relationship through Ace. That's how we got Bruce. And of course, Perkins came in and played drums. I asked him, hey, dude, will you be on the session? He was like, sure. And then I had about 35 pan players fly in from all over the States and Canada to be a part of it. And we threw it down, and we didn't know if it was going to work or not. And it was a success, which led to the Rush thing like a year later, or a year and a half later. So that's how.
Just for the audience, if you don't know who Perkins is, we're talking about Stephen Perkins from Jane's Addiction.
So sorry about that.
That's cool.
The nicest guy in the business.
Yeah, it really is. So before we go into the Pan Rocks Rush, let's cover the first time you played with Perkins in High Point. So I think what led to it was you'd come in the studio with my band, the 5Ls, and do some percussion, and you wound up meeting TJ, who was our producer, and TJ knew Perkins, and I think that's where the connect happened, right?
Actually, no. That was part of it, but the connection for that particular thing that we did with Perkins was a guy named Tom Neville had come into town and taken over, I think, the vice president of GTCC. And he knew of me, and he came into town and reached out, and he was trying to do all these things to get GTCC on the map. So he talked to TJ, tried to lift TJ up, because we all know who TJ is. People at GTCC didn't know who he was. I mean, that guy is, TJ, And so he was like, dude, yeah, sorry.
Real quick, Rich, TJ is Thomas Johnson, who produced like NoFX and all the band's Warped Tour records that came out. And I mean, Pointer for Pyros.
Rancid.
Yeah, Rancid. I mean, all the stuff you've listened to, this man produced.
Yeah, and he's right here.
Now is valid. Absolutely.
Yeah, so Tom kind of put that together, and Perkins was doing his drum clinic, and he was like, hey, man, you want to play a couple of tunes? Let Tracy put together a group. And then again, my players are from all over the place, so I have people drive and fly in just to do that night. And that's when I met Perkins for the second time in person. I met him the first time at a backstage at a Jane's show with TJ after I did that tribute, the Jane's Addiction tribute. So that was the first time we kind of solidified our relationship a little bit, and then everything went from there.
Yeah,
Tracy, I want to ask.
I'll share with you, Rich, a fanboy photo from that night of me and Steve.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see that. But before we get into it, I am very intrigued on how you got into the pan drumming and everything that you did there, because as I looked at your bio, I was reading some stuff, and you were definitely, as you mentioned, into the metal side, the punk side of things, and more of the, I want to just say, traditional drummer in the rock sense, right? How did you wind up getting involved in this? And obviously it kind of took you down this path once you, some people heard what you were doing and everything, but how did it start?
It basically started, a couple of things happened simultaneously. Nothing Shocking came out, which changed everybody's lives, our age. That literally you're going this way musically, and then that comes out, and you just went the other way. And of course, Perkins put steel drums on Jane Says. So I'm like, and that was just pretty cool. But at the time, while I was in Tyson Popsicle, I was also studying African drumming and playing with all these guys out at Durham, these from Guinea and Senegal. So my mind was opening up the world music, hence me playing percussion with Toxic, and instead of just the metal stuff. And so it was in my ear from Jane Says, and then when we had a gig, Rhythms of Life, with the African drumming thing, and we had a steel band open up for us, and I never seen it in person. And as soon as I saw and heard that in person, I'm like, I have to learn how to do that. So I found a steel band from a guy in Trinidad out of Charlotte. Found out I had an ear for it. I didn't know I had an ear for melody. I'd always been a drummer, never was a school musician. I don't do music or anything like that. And one thing led to another, and I went to Trinidad to see if I could play with the big boys down there. And in Trinidad, they have these 120-piece steel orchestras. So you're not talking about Margaritaville or palm trees. The music down there, literally, you could slam dance to. It was the same energy. The volumes are 120 decibels acoustically, so it engulfs you like you're at a rock concert. That's why I thought Pan Rocks would work. When I put these 200-piece steel drum bands playing, Rush and Metallica and stuff, because it has that same energy. So as soon as I went to Trinidad and played down there with those guys and found out that I could hang, that was in '95. I've been doing it ever since. So that's what hooked it. Yeah.
It's funny people say like, "Oh, that record changed my life," but literally hearing Nothing Shocking to you literally did change your life because your musical path went completely down a different way.
It really did. I mean, of course, when you're 6 and hear Kiss Alive, that's the first record that changes your life. And then I heard Exit Stage Left at 11. That changed your life. And then I was 18, and that's an age, that's the lyrics on the record and the music was different. And it was just a perfect time. And those were probably the big three for me. And I'm still hanging on to Jane's Addiction. And it's just, I can't even describe it in words what it's like to now know Stephen Perkins, because he's kind of responsible for all of this. We've had chats about that. And I get to play with him once in a while. And, I wouldn't say we're best friends or anything, but I can give him a call and he'll answer. We'll chat. Or if I'm in California, which I'll be next week, I might get to see him. But that's just been the biggest joy of it all, man. Just been able to kind of be in his world and see and hear about it through him when you're kind of growing up with it. That's
That's
just
awesome.
insane.
I remember I don't know if it's the first one or not, but I feel like that was one of the first record or first videos that was on both 120 Minutes and Headbangers Ball, and both viewers were confused at what was going on
Oh,
in the
Mount
best kind of way. Yes, but
Yeah.
like I don't know if like anybody kind of understood. Like you had people who were going to listen to like looking for their either their thrash bands or their hair bands on Headbangers Ball, and you're looking for the guys looking for their REM videos on 120 Minutes, and then this thing happens, and yeah, it's just
And we did you go to this show, Jay? We saw him at the brewery, which
I
is the
didn't see
size
him at
of
the
your living
brewery.
room.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
didn't
saw
see
him
him
in,
at the brewery.
yeah, right when they came out, we saw him there, and just see them in like a club the size of your living room, and then of course Lollapalooza, but whatever, a couple of years later. But man, seeing them right in front of your face was probably the best show I've ever been to.
They were the first band when I was back in New Jersey, and 9/11 had happened, and
Uh,
everything was like really tight security, and they were canceling stuff. And so the first show I went back to, and I remember it like vividly, like armed guards with machine guns at the door when you're going into the Coliseum, was Jane's Addiction with Live, who did an acoustic set, and Femi Kuti from Africa
huh.
uh, opened up the show. And
Wow.
just hearing Jane's in that moment of like uncertainty and what just happened in the world, and the whole world has just changed. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. That's they had that effect on us, man. Is that was a band, and they were the bridge to, as everyone says, kind of from the Hollywood thing into the Seattle thing. You know.
Yeah. So I did get to tell Perkins that night in High Point at his clinic. I said, the drum patterns in Mountain Song, in particular, on that album, that changed my life. Like it changed the way I looked at drums as an instrument.
Yeah.
I had not opened my mind up to patterns like that. It was just like, oh, how fast can I play? But then all of a sudden it was like, oh wait, there's these toms. What the hell is he doing?
Yeah.
And it was just to be able to tell somebody to influence you like that meant the world to me. So thank you
Yeah.
for making that opportunity happen.
That's beautiful, man. That was a good night, man. That was
It
definitely a good
was.
year.
We played in a drum circle, all of us, everybody there. We all got little thing to play. We all played drums together. It was great. Um, so we covered the origins. We covered the Pan Rocks LA stuff. You mentioned the Pan Rocks Rush stuff. So obviously, as drummers, Rich not included, um, Neil Peart had a major effect on our lives. So doing Pan Rocks Rush was really cool. Um, I'm guessing that came about from the Pan Rocks LA success. Why don't you uncover who was on that?
Yeah, we didn't know if the first one was going to work or not. And like the rock world or even my steel drum world, I'm like, who am I going to get in my world? Because my steel drum world is mostly band educators or music nerds. You know what I mean? I'm like total nerds. And so a lot of people didn't touch the first one. And then when they saw that turn out to be a success, and we were like in Drum Magazine and getting written up, of course, having the rock stars on there helped all that happen. And I had a good publicist. I met Matt Starr, who produced the first one. We were in Vegas, and he was like, "Well, what do you want to do next?" And I'm like, "Gotta do Rush, man." And he's like, "Okay, let's try to put it together." And then I was like, are there any steel drum players that even know who Rush is?" And so he was like, "Well, who would you want to get to play drums?" I'm like, "Well, Portnoy, because I got Billy Sheehan on the first one and met him through Matt because they were all in Mr. Big. And he was filling in for Torpoy, you know, and then they had Sons of Apollo on the side with Portnoy and Sheehan and those guys. So I think Sheehan must have asked, or Portnoy knew about us through Sheehan, and I think Sheehan put in a good word for me. He's the other nicest guy in the business, and he signed right on. And as soon as he signed on, I did all my phone calls, and I built the band before we went public with the press release. And I built the band because I didn't know if I would ever be able to do that. And as soon as we got the press release out, Mike Portnoy went into the studio with Pan Rocks to pay tribute to Rush. I spent 3 days turning away Pan players because we couldn't have any more. That was a good problem to have. So we got him. A secret here: the original plan was it was going to be Portnoy. We reached out to Les Claypool's people, and we talked to Steve Vai. That's who I was going to put a lien on my house to try to make that happen because those guys had never played before. Steve was gracious, but his schedule didn't work. And we talked to other guitar players, Steve Stevenson, John Five, some other guys, and their schedules couldn't make it work. We never heard back from Les Claypool. But one night I was playing at the Whiskey on one of those jams, and I met Philip Bino, who was bass player for Steve Vai, backstage, and we played a song. Actually, we played a Beyonce song together. I was playing drums, and he was playing bass on it for this girl singing, and he was like the coolest guy there. And I told Matt, I was like, we got to get Philip Bino, and if we can get Pete Thorne, I mean, he's from Canada, and he plays on everyone's record. That would be awesome. So at the last minute, literally a week before we went into the studio, we didn't have those guys. We landed those guys, came into the studio, and that's how that whole thing. So that was a little nerve-wracking. We didn't have a bass player and guitar player until a week before we went into the studio.
Cool. So I know all this stuff is on streaming. You have any physical copies of stuff available?
No, they have. We have the videos for all of it. Of course, we have the documentaries on both sessions, and then on the Pan Rocks Rush one, the audio for the first one's not available, I don't think. But the Pan Rocks Rush one you can get on Apple and all those streaming services, and we had it mixed in Dolby Atmos as well. So that was the first Steel Band project mixed in Dolby Atmos, so you can experience it with that whole thing.
The point of doing this tonight is I want to make sure people know who you are and what you're doing, and they go give it a listen because, yep, I think people's minds will be blown who haven't heard this yet. I know Rich had before I brought it up, And I asked him what his opinion was. He hadn't given it to me yet, so I'll get that on the side later.
No, I'll tell you right now, it's mind blowing what you can do, and the sounds that you can make, and how you can transform a song. And hearing, especially when obviously Rush stuff is just so complex, and everything that gets involved, and everything that happens there. What I'm intrigued at is because there's so many players who are known to people around the world, like famous musicians. I'm sure, like through a degree or two, some of the artists that you cover hear about your music, and what you do. Have you gotten any feedback from people who you've done covers of that were like, wow, that's pretty awesome, or something maybe not that? I can't imagine somebody wouldn't love this, but like, have you gotten any feedback from people who you have who've done covers of outside of like Perkins and those guys?
Not really. It's kind of surprising because I was kind of thinking these two projects would, you know what I mean, take it to the next thing. But that we got a lot of cool press, and everyone that listens to it loves it. The musicians, Billy Sheehan, even in our documentary, and Tracy Guns are like, look, we're old jaded guys, and this is one of the coolest things we've ever done. Once they get in the room with the band and there's a vibration, you get it. It's way more than just listening to it on headphones. Um, but it has allowed me to get into the room. Like, I'll be out in LA next week working with a high school band, and we're doing 2 days at the Warped Tour. We played the Warped Tour there last year with these kids, and I'm teaching them how to play anything from Motorhead to the Ramones to Rancid, and we're doing all that with a 50-piece steel drum band. So that's fun. So it's kind of got me in the door of those things. I'll be at the Whiskey again while I'm out there, I think, playing the following week. Hopefully they'll let me swing sticks and play drums on that one. But as far as it's gotten me, at least if I make calls to people are, they don't know who I am, but they're like, oh yeah, you're the guy that did the Pan Rocks thing. Or the only story that I have is one night we went and saw Buddy Rich's big band in LA after one of the NAMM shows. This would have been right before COVID happened, so 2020, when we did the tribute to Neil Peart with Mike Portnoy at the NAMM show. And I was hanging out with this guy, with Matt, and he was a younger guy. None of us were drinking or anything. We were just hanging out, watching the drummer and listening to this great music. And so I was like, so, his name was Brandon. I'm like, so what do you do? And he was like, yeah, man, I play for Marilyn Manson, who he plays with Offspring now, right? And he was just a kid. And he was like, I was like, holy shit, really? Oh, sorry. It's like, really? And he was like, what do you do? I'm like, I got this thing called Pan Rocks. And he knew all about it, especially from Mike Portnoy. So these guys are aware. So I've met a few people like in those kind of situations. So
I got to watch Brandon play actually a couple times because Offspring just seems to pop up wherever I go to like a festival, and
he's so good.
He's really, really, really good. Like he might be. I don't want to say he's too good, but like musician wise, compared to those guys who are, I don't want to say they're going through the motions, but they've done the same thing over and over. You kind of insert like this young kind of fiery drummer in there. You can tell that there's like a difference compared to some of the other things that are going.
1,000%. He's so good. He's another just super nice guy. You have this whole crop of these young drummers doing that these days too. I know Jay knows a few of them backing up these bands, and it just gives a different life and a different energy for these older guys. That have these young guys just pushing. It's beautiful to see.
Who were some of your favorite drummers, if you don't mind me asking?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Well, of course, I grew up. I wanted to be Peter Criss when you're 6, and then you hear Neil Peart. What I miss, like all my favorite drummers are like Peart, Stuart Copeland, Bosio, Steve Smith, all these guys from like around the early 80s. Every time you heard even their band, but you heard these drummers, you knew it was them. They had a sound. When you hear Stuart Copeland snares, like that's Copeland. When you heard Bosio, everyone had a personality, and then they had a drum sound with the personality. So most of my drummers are back in those days. I was a big Tommy Lee fan. I think he's one of the best rock drummers out there. He doesn't get credit, I don't think, that he should. And then, of course, Perkins, and he would describe his playing as his personality. He's like bubbly and positive, and his playing does that. He's got such a swing when he hits hard, and I love the way he pushes and pulls the music, which you just don't get anymore because everyone's on a click. he'll still push and pull, and it just so good to hear that these days. But he does it, of course, tastefully. But I would say those are my top ones. I mean, there's just so many good drummers out there.
The I tend to, because of Jay, and I've always been kind of drawn to drummers. One of my favorite guys is John Stanier from Helmet back in the day. Like he was one of my favorite guys because I watched him. I just sat and watched what he did, and I'm like, holy shit. But one of the guys who's blown me away lately, I don't know if you're familiar with Turnstile, but Daniel Fang from Turnstile, that dude, like,
Dude,
wow.
they're so good, man. And they're like one of the young bands I just can't get enough of. And all their stuff's in Dolby Atmos. So I sit in this room, and the guy that mixed their stuff nailed it. Jay, you should come over here and at some point
Yeah,
just listen to
let's
some
do
of the
it.
stuff in this room. It's insane. But you were talking about when you saw the drummer, and that's one of my things. I have to see them. Like when you see Tommy Lee play, you see the rhythm between his hits. You see the motion. And another guy that was like this, and Jay would totally agree, I'm sure. Shannon Larkin doesn't get the credit. That guy's one of the baddest guys that's ever lived. We used to open up for Rothschild when I was in Tipper Gore when I was like 18, and I used to just watch him from behind. And he was probably weighed 75 pounds, soaking wet, and it was just like an experience every time. That guy was so good, man, with
I
Rothschilds.
saw I saw Rothschild headline and Pantera open at, I want to say it was Beatty's over in
Probably,
St. Salem, where
dude.
I stood 2 feet from Dime. Like,
They were weren't they them and Kicks were like the groups, man, here on the
yeah,
East Coast. Those two bands live, you couldn't beat them going to the clubs. Kicks and Rothschild, and they were from the same area up in West Virginia, I think, as well, around Baltimore.
yeah, Rothschild was great. And then obviously he went on to play Godsmack later.
Yeah. And
Um,
now he's playing with Rothschild's bass player again, and Kicks' guitar player Brian Sporsot. They got a little cover band they got going on up there now.
yeah, I saw he's got a podcast as well.
Uh huh.
He's doing like videos or whatever.
Nice. Yeah.
I-
Yeah.
I'm a
He's one of
huge
my
Kick
favorites.
fan. That is, the funny thing about Kick, I was listening to their old records the other day. I'm like, this sounds more like the Police than it does hair metal. But that's a whole other story. That's a whole other podcast. The first couple of Kicks records.
They were so
Um,
good live, man.
the other, the minimalist stuff is what I like too. I'm a big Chuck Biscuits fan of Danzig and got to watch him kind of on a tiny kit just do stuff that lots of people would not be able to get the sound of. So anyway, I'm not a drummer. I'm just telling you what I love. But those are my guys.
As
But
long
I'd love
as
hearing
long as you
opinions
love
about that.
drummers, that's all that
Yeah,
matters.
that's the thing. As long as you love drummers, you're good to go, man. Cause
We're a fraternity,
yeah,
and they take pictures and symbols cut off our face, and they, we're not in the shot, but we're there, and the tempo is what I say it is. So really, we're the general of the band.
and we're usually the coolest guys in the band to hang out with. Usually.
Yeah, usually. Um, so you do, I know you do a bunch of teaching as well, like going out and working with high schools and different like band players across the country. I see that all the time, and I love it. Um, uh, you know, it's it's you spreading your knowledge of this thing that you love so much to other folks that are going to adopt this knowledge and start loving the same thing you love. It's how you grow like a thing.
Hope so. That's kind of what I've turned into as this guest artist, and that's kind of how I get to do what I love to do. I get to go to schools that already have bands, and the band directors that pull me in are the band directors that would kind of get what I do and say, "Hey, man, can we have a pan rock thing at our school?" Some schools I go to every year, like the school I go to next week in Oceanside, California, I go to like 4 times a year, and
Cool.
and then I go to different ones all the time. And then sometimes we'll get a lot, like 4 or 5 schools together, and then at the end we do this moss band.
Yeah, I hope it does, man. You are amazing at what you do. Um, like I said, I've known Tracy forever, and one of the fucking nicest guys you ever meet, like hands down.